Yes, you read the title of the video correctly. Despite WWE doing their level best to drive away as many of their diehard fans as they could in 2021, despite committing a babality on the greatest part of their product, despite releasing swathes of talent, some of whom fans had hoped would be the future of the company, and despite the abject losses of a group literally called The New Day on a show literally called Day One, which is as on the nose as metaphors get, we're starting this year with a purely positive WWE list. Why? Well, partly because Ollie Davis told me to, and who am I to argue with my sinewy, weak tea loving, incredibly intense content overlord, but also to provide a much needed sense of balance and something to anchor our continued 2022 coverage of a wrestling company that otherwise makes supporting it sincerely tricky. Whether it's the golden era of the 80s, the vibrancy of the Attitude Era, or the lunacy of ruthless aggression, WWE fans consistently compare the big dub to its past glories. And yes, in many ways the current product is worse, but it's always worth remembering that WWE has improved themselves in a number of different ways over the past decades. How many ways? Well, I'm Adam, hailing from partsFUNknown, and here are 10 ways WWE have changed for the better. And you know the one way you can help us change for the better? It's by liking and subscribing. It helps us get bigger and better and 2022 and other buzzwords. Subscribe, please. Number 10, actual finishes, mostly. The 80s were a hell of a time to be a wrestling fan. The Rock and Wrestling Connection, the numerous amazing characters that made up the mid-card to Hulkamania, the incredibly deep tag division, those were all good. But do you know what was also synonymous with wrestling in the 80s? No f***ers ever losing. Seriously, for modern fans who've got used to a satisfying match conclusion on pay-per-view, 80s WWE is borderline unwatchable, with at least 75% of matches ending with the old standard double count out followed by brawl to the back. Guys like Roddy Piper and Jim Duggan refusing to ever do a job. Even the Attitude Era was plagued with endless DQs and run-ins. It's why we get up in arms over finishes like Rhea Ripley versus Charlotte at Hell in a Cell last year, or The Fiend versus Seth Rollins, because they're far and away the outliers in this day and age. Say what you want about some of the more questionable pay-per-view results we get today. At least WWE don't end the main event of WrestleMania on a DQ anymore. Here's looking at you, WrestleMania 8, you monstrous turd. And speaking of WrestleMania, number 9, 2 Night WrestleManias. Please, 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 WWE, keep the 2 Night WrestleMania forever. For Manias 32 to 35, WWE's granddaddy of them all lost its goddamn mind in its old age, with each show clocking in at an unwatchable 5 hours, not even taking the pre-show into account. That is too much wrestling for one sitting. Please and thank you and you. For 4 straight years, WrestleMania was an exhausting slog that dampened even the most hardcore fans' enthusiasm for even the dreamiest of dream matches. The prospect of instead having 2 3-hour shows to blow off the year's feuds is an absolute godsend. Allows for multiple main events, affording that prestigious platform to stars who otherwise wouldn't receive it, gives extra time to certain matches that might otherwise be shortchanged on a single card, and gives us a bloody break to recharge our batteries. This is a positive change. Please keep it, WWE, we beg of you. Number 8, better athletes. Once upon a time in the 1980s, the average WWE mid-carder was a barrel-chested, unshaven man who'd smoke a cigarette to warm up, plod down to the ring, have his high spot of the match be an arm drag before wandering away to drink a hotel dry and fight a policeman. A lot of that was excused because guys like Jake Roberts or the Ultimate Warrior were amazing characters, but there's no denying that today's roster is top to bottom premier athletes, and also Omos is there. Even the main event of today, previously the home of slow giants who taunted more than they tussled, is now whip fast and crazy agile. The day one result is mind-boggling, but you can't deny that all 5 men gave it socks. Even after all the releases, WWE's roster is packed to the gills with super athletes. If only the big dub would let half of them achieve their full potential, every premium live event could be the wrestling show of the year. Number 7, a better mix of kayfabe and reality. Ever since the pipe bomb, reality and fan expectation have been a fundamental part of WWE storytelling. The fact isn't always to WWE's liking. Daniel Bryan's road to WrestleMania 30 was not the plan, and let them never convince you it was, but by and large, the fact that fans are smarter, more opinionated, and more willing to enforce their opinions on the WWE product is a good thing. It gave us the Man Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks versus Bianca in the main event of Night 1 WrestleMania, and numerous other examples of fans forcing WWE's hand. Compared to previous generations where the fans had next to no say in who was in the main event, today's product is still occasionally, not always, but occasionally willing to bend its course based on who the fans decree is most deserving. And then Big E gets beaten by Brock Lesnar, and no damn it, we're staying positive. Number 6, Roman Reigns. And talking about fans receiving their ultimate vindication, we hate to say we told you so, except no we don't, we love to say we told you so. And after years of the toxic culture growing and booing around perennially miscast uber babyface Roman Reigns, WWE finally turned him heel, and we told you so. With the possible exception of Bryan Danielson and Adam Page, heel Roman Reigns is still, and has been for 17 months, the best thing in professional wrestling. Genuinely, it feels like WWE hasn't had a character this compelling, this right place, right time, this big match reliable since Austin or even Hogan. Promos, wrestling, merch, main events, sheer star power. There's nothing else quite like the Tribal Chief. God knows who's going to be capable to beat him for the Universal Championship, which you could argue is a problem, but it's also WWE's problem to solve, because whoever does is going to be a megastar because of it, unless it's Brock Lesnar. It shouldn't be him, you guys. Please, please. Number 5, more POC champions. Since the inception of the WWE Championship in 1963 right up until 2018, which is 55 years for anyone who's not so hot on their Steiner math, there was precisely one black WWE champion. In the last 2 years, there have been 3. At a time where AEW's president has found himself embroiled in a Twitter controversy over a perceived lack of diversity in his top stars, whichever side of that argument you fall on, the same cannot be leveled at WWE these days. In the last few years, WWE's had a Samoan wrestler as its biggest star, booked a WrestleMania main event between 2 black women, crowned every member of the New Day, in one case literally. It may have taken WWE a long time to become as diverse as it has, but it's as inclusive a roster as possibly there's ever been in the history of wrestling. And in terms of motivating the stars of tomorrow, that is a wonderful thing. Likewise, number 4, fewer stereotypes. Okay, look, finding 10 ways WWE has improved is difficult, to the point that yes, I'm dedicating an entire entry to congratulating WWE for not being as offensive as it used to be. Well done, WWE, big gold star for you. Among the problematic tropes that used to be everywhere but are currently nowhere in WWE's product: sneaky Japanese salt-throwing bastards, black and Samoan people having harder heads than everyone else, Mexicans riding lawnmowers, people doing blackface, Islamic people summoning terrorists through prayer, foreigners screaming death to America, and Vince McMahon saying the N-word on pay-per-view, sorry, premium live event. Sure, WWE occasionally still showcases a heel whose main crime is being proud of the country they come from, but by and large, things are better these days. Mostly, a bit. And speaking of divisions who've received 1,000,000% more respect than they used to, number 3, women's wrestling. Cast your minds back 10 years. In 2012, women's wrestling was an irrelevance. At WrestleMania 28, the only women's match was Beth Phoenix and Eve Torres versus Kelly Kelly and Maria Menounos. At SummerSlam 2012, there wasn't even a women's match at all. It was truly the era of the Divas Championship piss break match. In the years since then, the NXT women's division changed the game. The women's revolution happened. There have been women's Money in the Bank matches, Royal Rumbles, 2 separate WrestleMania main events. We have the luxury of complaining that stars like Becky Lynch or Charlotte Flair win too often on pay-per-view, sorry, premium live event, when 10 years ago such a complaint would be unheard of. By far and away, credible women's wrestling, belts that mean something, stars capable of shouldering pay-per-views. WWE's women's division is by far the company's most visible change for the better. But also whatever it's doing with its women's tag championships, like Jesus, what the f are you doing? Number 2, a healthier locker room. Ah yes, says The Undertaker, leaning back on the throne in his ranch, wearing one of his right-wing tees and sipping on a cold glass of guns and cigarettes. The olden days when men were men. The Undertaker came under fire last year for bemoaning the fact that WWE's locker room has gone soft, and that nowadays the wrestlers were more concerned with playing video games and indulging in the more traditional backstage antics, i.e. getting addicted to pain medication, carrying weapons and lamping each other in the face. While WWE still fosters a general sense of paranoid misery in its locker room, don't fix what isn't broken, I guess, at least there's been a significant drop-off in drug-addled macho bullshit. Over the years, a prevalence of high-level athletes and good old-fashioned nerds has given rise to a locker room that's more focused on clean living and PS5s than on self-medication and rage. And as DDP himself would say, that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. And number 1, protecting the wrestlers' brains. WWE doesn't let its wrestlers crack each other over the head with steel furniture anymore. Not much more you can say about that, really. Between the wellness policy, a healthier locker room, and far more concussion awareness leading to hard bans on head and brain-based offense, hopefully we're going to see far fewer wrestlers dying in their 60s. I don't really have a joke to follow that bit up, so here's a lovely picture of a corgi instead. Isn't that lovely? There are lots of criticisms that can rightfully be hurled in WWE's direction, from their seeming hatred of tag team wrestling, the women's mid-card stuttering recently, the Saudi shows, and just everything else. But in at least this way, WWE has improved light years above where it used to be. And hell, might as well start the year with as close to a smile as we can, right? Right? And that's our list. Let's try and have a positive comment section if that's at all possible in this day and age. Let us know how you think WWE has improved the most in recent years. Make sure you subscribe to partsFUNknown for more silly wrestling content. And above all, jam that jam. Happy New Year, everyone.